Jake Murphy sat in the back row of the classroom trying to stay awake. The chair was too small for him, made for the smaller Altarian students who made up most of the class. His legs were cramped and his back hurt from leaning forward to see the holographic display at the front of the room. Commander Vex Tholar stood beside the glowing blue projection, his scaled green skin catching the light. The Saurian instructor was tall and thin, with yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. His voice had a hissing quality that made everything sound dangerous, even when he was talking about simple things. "Today we study the apex predators of the galaxy," Tholar said, his clawed finger pointing at the hologram. "These creatures sit at the top of their food chains. They fear nothing and hunt everything." Jake looked around at his classmates. There were 30 cadets from 12 different worlds in this xenobiology class. Most of them were much better students than he was. Zixathera sat in the front row, her 4 arms taking notes faster than Jake could think. The Zephyrian looked like a giant mantis with green skin that shimmered like metal. Her large black eyes could see things moving that others missed completely. She was the best fighter in their class and probably the smartest too. Behind her sat Brack Stonehammer, taking up 2 chairs because of his size. The Terralite looked like he was made of gray rock stuck together. His people came from a high-gravity world, which made him incredibly strong. Jake had seen him lift training equipment that took 3 humans to move. Noom floated in his water-filled mobility suit near the window. The cetacean was brilliant at strategy and could solve math problems in his head that made Jake's brain hurt. His people lived in the oceans of their world and were natural geniuses, but they needed special suits to survive on land. Then there was Jake. Human. Average height, average strength, average intelligence. His people were called generalists by the other species, which was a nice way of saying they weren't really good at anything special. Humans could do many things, but they couldn't do any one thing better than the specialists. The Kethvar, Tholar continued, is perhaps the most dangerous predator we have ever discovered. The hologram changed to show a massive creature. It was 12 feet tall and walked on 6 legs. Its body was covered in black fur that seemed to absorb light. The head was huge, with a mouth full of teeth like broken glass. But the most terrifying thing was its eyes, 6 of them, each one glowing red in the dark. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even in hologram form, the Kethvar looked like a nightmare. "This specimen comes from Mortis Prime," Tholar said. "A death world where only the strongest survive. The Kethvar hunts in packs, but each individual is capable of taking down prey 50 times its size." Jake tried to take notes, but his mind kept wandering. He wondered why he was even here at the Galactic Military Academy. His test scores were decent but not great. His physical training results were average. He had been accepted, but sometimes he felt like it was just to fill a quota for human students. "The most interesting aspect of the Kethvar," Tholar continued, "is its psychic abilities. It can sense the fear and intentions of its prey from great distances. This makes it nearly impossible to hide from or surprise." Cadet Voss, an Altarian with blue skin and silver eyes, raised her hand. "Commander, has any species ever successfully tamed a Kethvar?" Tholar's yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter. "No, every attempt has ended in death. The Kethvar recognizes only strength and dominance. It has never shown submission to any being." Jake found that interesting. On Earth, humans had tamed wolves, which became dogs. They had tamed wild horses and even worked with dolphins. His species seemed to have a gift for understanding other animals, even dangerous ones. "We actually have a live specimen here at the academy," Tholar announced. This got everyone's attention. Even Jake sat up straighter. "It is kept in the high-security xenobiology lab on Deck 7. The containment field is the strongest we have ever built. Multiple backup systems ensure that it cannot escape." Cadet Kor, a reptilian Dracon, asked, "Why keep such a dangerous creature?" "To study it," Tholar replied. "If we can understand how apex predators think and hunt, we can better defend against them. The Kethvar represents millions of years of evolution focused on one thing, killing efficiently." Jake thought about Earth's predators. Great white sharks, polar bears, tigers, crocodiles. His world had produced some impressive hunters too, though none quite as terrifying as the Kethvar. "Tomorrow," Tholar said, "you will have a practical examination. We will observe the Kethvar in person from a safe distance. You will analyze its behavior and write a report on its hunting patterns." The class ended and students began filing out. Jake packed his notes slowly, not eager to return to his small dormitory room. As he stood, he noticed Zixathera looking at him. "Human Jake," she said in her clicking voice, "you seem distracted today." "Just thinking," Jake replied. "About what?" Jake hesitated. "About why I'm here. Everyone else has something special. You're fast and strong. Brack is incredibly tough. Noom is a genius. What do I bring to the team?" Zixathera tilted her insect head. "Perhaps you have not discovered it yet." "Maybe there's nothing to discover," Jake said. "Every species that reaches the stars has something special," she said. "Your people would not be here otherwise." Jake wasn't convinced, but he thanked her for the encouragement. As he walked back to his room through the station's corridors, he passed other cadets from dozens of different worlds. Each one had obvious advantages: natural armor, enhanced senses, incredible strength, or genius-level intelligence. He stopped at an observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his homeworld, a blue and green planet where his ancestors had climbed down from trees and eventually built spaceships. They hadn't been the strongest or fastest creatures on their world, but somehow they had ended up in charge. Jake pressed his palm against the cool metal of the window. Tomorrow he would see the Kethvar in person, the galaxy's most perfect predator, a creature that had never bowed to anyone. He wondered what it would be like to face something like that. As he headed to his room, Jake had no idea that in less than 24 hours, he would find out exactly what his species brought to the galaxy, and it would be something that even the Kethvar would respect. The xenobiology lab on Deck 7 was bigger than Jake had expected. The room was circular, with thick transparent walls that could withstand explosions. In the center was a raised observation platform where the 30 cadets now stood, looking down at the containment area below. Commander Tholer checked his tablet one more time. "Remember, you are completely safe. The containment field uses the same technology that powers our ship's shields. The Kethvar cannot reach you." Jake looked down at the creature in the center of the room. It was even more terrifying in person than in the hologram. The Kethvar paced back and forth in its cage, which was made of pure energy rather than metal bars. The red glow from its 6 eyes cast strange shadows on the walls. The beast was massive. Its black fur seemed to absorb all light around it, making it look like a moving shadow. Each of its 6 legs ended in claws that could probably cut through steel. When it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of teeth that looked like broken glass. "Notice how it moves," Tholer said. "Every step is calculated. It is constantly analyzing its environment, looking for weaknesses." Brake Stonehammer leaned forward on the railing. "It looks angry," the Terralite said in his deep, rumbling voice. "Not angry," Tholer corrected. "Frustrated. It has been in captivity for 6 months. Its hunting instincts are strong, but it has no prey." The Kethvar suddenly stopped pacing and looked directly up at the observation platform. All 6 red eyes focused on the group of cadets. Several students stepped back from the railing. "Can it see us?" asked Cadet Voss, her blue Altarian skin looking pale. "Yes," Tholer replied, "and it can sense your emotions through its psychic abilities. Try to remain calm." Jake felt something strange in his mind, like a cold finger touching his thoughts. It wasn't painful, just uncomfortable. Around him, other students were shifting nervously. Noom's tentacles were moving rapidly in his water suit, a sign that the cetacean was upset. Only Zixathera seemed unaffected. The Zephyrian stood perfectly still, her large black eyes studying the creature below. "Now," Tholer said, "I want you to observe its behavior patterns. Notice how an alarm began blaring throughout the lab. Red lights flashed on the walls." Tholer immediately looked at his tablet, his yellow eyes widening with shock. "Containment breach in Sector 5, came a voice over the intercom. "All personnel evacuate immediately." But they weren't in Sector 5, they were in Sector 7. Tholer's claws clicked rapidly across his tablet screen. "Impossible," he muttered. Jake looked down at the Kethvar. The creature had stopped moving and was now standing perfectly still in the center of its cage. Its head was tilted up toward them, and all 6 eyes were glowing brighter than before. "Commander," Zixathera said urgently, "the containment field is flickering." Jake could see it too. The energy barrier that surrounded the Kethvar was becoming unstable. Bright blue sparks were jumping between the field generators. Tholer's hands moved frantically over his controls. "The system is not responding. Something is interfering with the power grid." The lights in the lab dimmed. Several students began backing toward the exit. Everyone remain calm, Tholer ordered, but Jake could hear fear in the instructor's voice. The containment field flickered again, and for a split second it disappeared completely. The Kethvar took one step forward, testing the barrier. When the field snapped back on, the creature stepped back, but its eyes never left the observation platform. "We need to evacuate," Tholer said, his voice tight with tension. "Move toward the exit slowly. Do not run." The cadets began moving toward the door, but they were only halfway there when the containment field failed completely. The blue energy barrier vanished with a sound like breaking glass. The Kethvar was free. For a moment, nothing happened. The creature stood in the exact center of the room, looking up at the 30 cadets on the platform above. Then it opened its mouth and let out a sound that Jake felt in his bones. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was something much worse, a psychic scream that hit every mind in the room like a hammer. Jake felt his knees buckle as waves of pure hunting instinct washed over him. Around him, other students were falling to the ground, clutching their heads. The Kethvar moved with impossible speed. Its 6 legs propelled it up the wall of the containment area and onto the observation platform in one fluid leap. It landed among the cadets with a sound like thunder. Panic erupted. Students screamed and ran toward the exit. But the blast doors had automatically sealed when the containment failed. They were trapped, Zigzathera was the first to react. Her Zephyrian reflexes allowed her to dodge the creature's first swipe, but barely. The Kethvar's claws missed her head by inches, leaving deep gouges in the metal wall behind her. Bragg tried to use his size and strength to protect the smaller students. He stepped between the Kethvar and a group of Altarians, his rock-like skin providing some protection. But the creature was too strong. One swipe from its massive paw sent the Terralite flying across the room. Noom was trapped in his mobility suit, unable to move quickly enough to escape. The cetacean's brilliant mind was useless against a creature that thought only with its killing instincts. Commander Tholer was trying to reach an emergency control panel, but the Kethvar moved to block him. The instructor's natural saurian combat skills were no match for millions of years of evolution focused on one purpose: hunting and killing. Jake found himself pressed against the sealed blast door with a dozen other terrified cadets. The Kethvar's psychic screams were getting stronger, filling his mind with images of teeth and claws and blood. He could feel the creature's hunger, its rage at being caged for so long, its pure joy at finally having prey. The beast grabbed Cadet Core, the young Draken who had asked questions yesterday. Its claws pierced through the reptilian's natural scales like they were made of paper. Core's scream was cut short as the Kethvar's teeth found his throat. First blood had been drawn. The sweet smell filled the air, and the Kethvar's hunting instincts went into overdrive. Its psychic emanations became a storm of predatory excitement that made thinking almost impossible. Jake watched in horror as his classmates were systematically hunted down. The creature wasn't just killing randomly, it was enjoying itself. This was what it had been bred for, what its entire species existed to do. The security forces would eventually break through the sealed doors, but their protocols required 8 minutes of containment procedures before they could enter. 8 minutes might as well be 8 hours. Jake looked around at his surviving classmates. Zigzathera was bleeding from a deep cut on her arm. Brack was unconscious against the far wall. Noom was trying to hide behind his water suit. Commander Tholer was cornered near the control panel, his yellow eyes wide with terror. The Kethvar was methodically working its way through the room, savoring each kill. Its red eyes glowed brighter with each drop of blood it spilled. Jake realized that in a few more minutes they would all be dead. He pressed his back against the cold metal of the blast door and tried to think. There had to be something he could do, some way to save his friends. But what could one average human do against a perfect killing machine? As the Kethvar turned toward the remaining group of terrified cadets, Jake knew he was about to find out. The Kethvar stood over the body of another cadet, its black fur now stained with dark blood. 6 red eyes surveyed the remaining survivors huddled against the blast door. Jake could feel its satisfaction through the psychic connection, a cold pleasure that made his stomach turn. Only 12 cadets were still alive. The others lay scattered across the observation platform, their bodies torn and broken. The metallic smell of blood filled the air, mixed with the ozone scent of damaged electronics. Zigzathera was trying to help wounded classmates, but her own arm was badly injured. Green blood seeped between her fingers where the creature's claws had found their mark. Brack was slowly regaining consciousness, his rocky hide cracked but not broken. Noom floated in his suit, tentacles pressed against the glass in terror. Commander Tholer had managed to activate a distress beacon, but the blast doors wouldn't open for another 6 minutes. 6 minutes that none of them were likely to survive. The Kethvar began moving toward the huddled group of survivors. Its 6 legs carried it forward with the fluid grace of a natural killer. Each step was deliberate, calculated. It wasn't rushing now, it was savoring the hunt. Jake felt the creature's psychic pressure growing stronger as it approached. The mental weight was crushing, filled with images of death and the joy of killing. Most of his classmates were paralyzed by fear, their minds overwhelmed by the predator's mental assault. But something was different for Jake. The psychic attack affected him, but not as strongly as the others. He could still think, still move. Maybe it was because humans were newer to space travel, their minds not yet fully adapted to psychic species. Or maybe it was something else entirely. The Kethvar stopped 5 feet away from the group, its massive head tilted to one side, studying them like a cat watching trapped mice. The creature was deciding which one to kill next, taking its time to enjoy their terror. Jake looked at his friends, his classmates who had accepted him despite being just an average human. Zixthara, who had encouraged him yesterday. Brack, who had shared his food when Jake couldn't afford the good meals. Noom, who had helped him with strategy homework. They were going to die, and there was nothing he could do about it. He was just human, no special strength, no enhanced speed, no natural weapons. What could one ordinary person do against a creature that had never been defeated? Then something stirred in Jake's mind. Not the Kethvar's psychic intrusion, but something deeper. Something that felt like an echo from long ago. He thought about Earth. About the blue and green world where his ancestors had lived for millions of years. They hadn't started as the dominant species. They had been small, weak creatures living in trees, hiding from bigger predators. But they had survived. More than that, they had thrived. Jake pushed himself away from the blast door. His movement caught the Kethvar's attention, and all 6 red eyes focused on him. The psychic pressure increased, trying to freeze him in place like the others. Instead, Jake took a step forward. "What are you doing?" Zixthara whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake didn't answer. He couldn't explain what was happening to him, because he didn't fully understand it himself. Something ancient was awakening in his mind, something that had been sleeping in his DNA for thousands of generations. He took another step toward the Kethvar. The creature's massive head lowered slightly, bringing its 6 eyes level with Jake's face. This close, he could see the intelligence behind those red orbs. This wasn't just a mindless killing machine. It was a thinking predator, one that had evolved to be the perfect hunter. Jake's breathing began to change. It became slower, deeper, more controlled. His posture shifted subtly, his shoulders squaring, his stance widening. He wasn't moving like a terrified student anymore. He was moving like a predator. The change was instinctive, triggered by something buried deep in human genetics. His ancestors had faced down cave bears and saber-toothed cats. They had hunted mammoths across frozen plains and tracked prey for days without giving up. They had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain not through strength or speed, but through something else entirely. Jake spread his arms wide, not in surrender but in a display of dominance. It was a gesture as old as humanity itself, the same one his ancestors had used to make themselves look bigger when facing dangerous animals. The Kethvar stopped moving. For the first time since escaping its containment, the creature hesitated. Its psychic emanations changed, becoming less focused on killing and more on analysis. It was trying to understand what it was seeing. Jake maintained eye contact with all 6 red orbs. On Earth, staring down a predator was usually a bad idea, but this felt different. This felt right. He wasn't challenging the creature, he was introducing himself as an equal. The Kethvar tilted its head further, studying this strange bipedal being who showed no fear. Its psychic probes pushed deeper into Jake's mind, searching for the source of his confidence. What it found there made the creature take a step backward. In Jake's genetic memory, the Kethvar saw images that it recognized. Humans tracking wounded prey across vast distances, never giving up, never stopping. Persistence hunters who could run down animals much faster and stronger than themselves simply by refusing to quit. It saw early humans working together to bring down massive mammoths. using tools and tactics that turned their weakness into strength. Pack hunters who could coordinate attacks with a precision that impressed even the Kethvar's predatory instincts. But most importantly, it saw something that no other species in the galaxy possessed: the willingness to hunt other apex predators. Not for food or territory, but for the challenge. Humans who tracked down great white sharks, faced polar bears, and challenged every dangerous creature their world had to offer. The Kethvar had never encountered a species like this before. Every other race it had faced either fled from danger or fought it head-on. But humans did something different entirely. They adapted to danger, learned from it, and then sought it out. Jake took another step forward. The movement was calm and deliberate, without aggression but also without fear. He was presenting himself not as prey or as a competitor, but as something the Kethvar had never seen before. Another apex predator that had earned its place at the top through pure determination. The creature's psychic emanations began to change again. The bloodlust was fading, replaced by something that might have been curiosity, or even respect. Jake could feel the shift in the air. Behind him, his classmates were watching in stunned silence as their human friend faced down the galaxy's most perfect killer. They couldn't understand what was happening, but they could sense that something fundamental had changed in the room. The Kethvar was no longer looking at Jake like prey. It was looking at him like an equal. The psychic connection between Jake and the Kethvar deepened. What had started as the creature's hunting probe became something else entirely, a sharing of memories that went back millions of years. Through Jake's human DNA, the Kethvar experienced flashes of Earth's history. It saw the African savanna where early humans first learned to hunt in groups. Small, weak creatures who compensated for their physical limitations by working together and never giving up. The images came faster now. Humans tracking mammoth herds across frozen landscapes, following them for weeks until the massive beasts collapsed from exhaustion. Persistence hunting that required no strength or speed, only the absolute refusal to stop. The Kethvar saw human ancestors facing down cave lions with nothing but sharpened sticks and the determination to protect their families. It witnessed the slow climb up Earth's food chain, species by species, predator by predator. But what impressed the creature most was humanity's relationship with other apex predators. Every other species the Kethvar knew either avoided such creatures or fought them only when necessary. Humans were different. They actively sought out the most dangerous animals on their world. Through Jake's genetic memory, the Kethvar experienced the thrill of early humans hunting great sharks in primitive boats. It felt the cold determination of Arctic peoples who faced polar bears armed with only spears and courage. It saw humans tracking tigers through dense jungles, not for food but for the challenge of testing themselves against the ultimate hunters. The creature's 6 red eyes widened slightly. In all its travels across the galaxy, in all the species it had encountered, it had never seen anything like this. Most intelligent races developed technology to avoid dangerous predators. Humans developed technology to hunt them more effectively. Jake could feel the Kethvar's growing understanding. The creature was beginning to recognize something in him that transcended species boundaries. The mark of a true apex predator. Not one born with natural weapons or superior strength, but one forged by millions of years of refusing to be anything but the survivor. The psychic images shifted to more recent human history. The Kethvar saw humans exploring their oceans, mapping every trench and cave where dangerous creatures might hide. It witnessed them climbing the highest mountains and exploring the deepest caves, always pushing into places where death waited around every corner. Most telling of all, it saw humans venturing into space itself. When they had conquered every predator on their home world, they had looked to the stars for new challenges. They hadn't traveled to space to find safety or resources. They had come looking for whatever dangers the galaxy might offer. The Kethvar's posture began to change. Its aggressive stance softened, becoming less predatory and more analytical. The creature was reassessing everything it thought it knew about prey and predator relationships. Jake sensed the shift and took another careful step forward. His movements remained calm and controlled, but there was something different about his bearing now. The human teenager was gone, replaced by something much older and more fundamental. The genetic echo of humanity's long climb to dominance. Behind him, his classmates watched in amazement. Zixthera's compound eyes were wide with disbelief. Even with her superior Zephyrian reflexes, she had been no match for the Kethvar. Yet here was Jake, supposedly the weakest member of their class, facing the creature as an equal. Commander Tholer was recording everything through his damaged tablet, his scientific mind struggling to understand what he was witnessing. In 6 months of study, the Kethvar had never shown anything but aggression toward its captors. Now it was exhibiting behavior that had never been documented. The creature took a step backward, its 6 legs moving with careful precision. For the first time in its life, the Kethvar was showing deference to another being. Not submission born of fear or defeat, but recognition of something it respected. Jake felt the creature's psychic emanations change completely. The bloodlust was gone, replaced by something that might have been admiration. Through their mental connection, he could sense the Kethvar's thoughts. The creature was remembering its own world, Mortis Prime, a death world where only the strongest and most adaptable survived. It had been born into an ecosystem where every other creature was either predator or prey, with no middle ground. But Earth, Jake's world, had been different. It had produced a species that refused to accept either role. Humans had been prey once, hiding in trees from larger predators. But they had adapted, learned, and eventually turned the tables on every creature that threatened them. The Kethvar recognized this quality because it was something its own species valued above all else, the ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle. But humans had taken it further than any species the creature had ever encountered. They hadn't just adapted to their environment, they had reshaped it entirely. Through Jake's memories, the Kethvar saw cities that stretched across continents, technology that could split atoms or reach other worlds, and humans who had made themselves the undisputed masters of their planet. All of this accomplished by a species with no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no obvious physical advantages. The creature's massive head lowered slightly, and Jake felt a profound shift in its psychic emanations. The Kethvar was experiencing something it had never felt before: respect for another apex predator. Not the grudging acknowledgement it might show to a worthy opponent, but genuine respect for a species that had earned its place through the same qualities the Kethvar valued most: intelligence, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Jake reached out slowly with one hand, palm open in a gesture of peaceful contact. The movement was deliberate and non-threatening, but it carried an authority that the Kethvar immediately recognized. This wasn't the gesture of prey trying to appease a predator. It was the greeting of one apex species to another, offered in a spirit of mutual respect. The Kethvar studied Jake's outstretched hand for a long moment. Its 6 red eyes focused on the small, soft appendage that seemed so weak compared to its own claws. But through their psychic connection, it understood that this hand represented something far more dangerous than claws. Human hands that had crafted the first tools, built the first weapons, and eventually reached out to touch the stars themselves. Hands that had no natural weapons of their own, but had learned to make weapons more deadly than any claw or fang. The creature made its decision. The Kethvar's massive body began to lower itself toward the floor, its 6 legs folded beneath it in a movement that was both graceful and deliberate. The creature's enormous head dropped until it was level with Jake's chest. All 6 red eyes focused on the human's face. Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. What he was witnessing had never been recorded in galactic history. The Kethvar, a creature that had never shown submission to any being, was performing what could only be described as a bow. The psychic connection between them pulsed with meaning that went beyond words. Through their shared mental link, Jake understood what was happening. This wasn't surrender or defeat. It was recognition, one apex predator acknowledging another. The creature's emanations carried images from its own world, Mortis Prime. Jake saw flashes of the deadly planet where the Kethvar had evolved, a place where survival was earned through strength and cunning. He witnessed the brutal hierarchy of that world, where only the most perfect predators reached the top of the food chain. But in Jake's genetic memory, the Kethvar had found something that impressed even its hardened predatory instincts. Not just another apex species, but one that had achieved dominance through pure adaptation and refusal to quit. A species that didn't just survive in their environment, they conquered it completely. Jake slowly placed his hand on the creature's massive head. The black fur was surprisingly soft beneath his palm, warm with the heat of a living being that had just moments ago been a killing machine. Now it remained perfectly still, accepting his touch with something that could only be called reverence. Through their connection, Jake felt the Kethvar's understanding deepen. The creature recognized the echoes of humanity's greatest trait, not their intelligence or their technology, but their absolute refusal to accept limits. Every challenge their species had faced, they had either overcome or died trying. There was no middle ground, no acceptance of defeat. The observation platform was completely silent except for the hum of damaged electronics. Jake's surviving classmates stared in shock at the scene before them. Their average human friend, the one they had sometimes pitied for lacking special abilities, was somehow communing with the galaxy's most feared predator. Commander Tholer's tablet continued recording, capturing footage that would revolutionize everything the galaxy thought it knew about both species. His scientific mind raced with the implications of what he was witnessing. Zixathara, despite her injuries, moved closer to get a better view. Her Zephyrian senses could detect the subtle changes in the room's atmosphere. The psychic storm of rage and bloodlust had been replaced by something entirely different, a mutual respect that transcended species boundaries. Jake could feel the Kethvar sharing more memories through their link. Images of its capture 6 months ago, when an entire fleet of ships had been required to subdue it. The creature had fought with desperate fury, killing dozens before finally being overwhelmed by superior numbers and technology. But now, through Jake's genetic memories, it understood something that changed everything. Humans didn't conquer through superior firepower alone. They conquered through understanding. They studied their prey, learned their weaknesses, and then used that knowledge to turn strength into weakness. The Kethvar had seen this pattern in Jake's ancestral memories. Humans tracking massive woolly rhinos until the beast collapsed from exhaustion, early hunters who learned to make fire and use it to drive entire herds over cliffs. A species that turned their physical weakness into an advantage by refusing to fight fair. More importantly, the creature recognized humanity's unique relationship with other predators. Where most species avoided dangerous encounters, humans actively sought them out. They had tamed wolves into dogs, turning their greatest rivals into allies. They had studied sharks, lions, and bears not to avoid them, but to understand and ultimately dominate them. Through their psychic connection, Jake felt the Kethvar's profound shift in perspective. For the first time in its existence, the creature was encountering a species that thought like it did, always hunting, always adapting, always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The blast doors suddenly burst open with a hiss of hydraulics. Security forces in full combat armor stormed into the lab, weapons raised and ready. They stopped short when they saw the impossible scene before them. A human cadet with his hand resting gently on the head of a docile Kethvar. "Hold your fire," Commander Tholar called out, his voice hoarse with amazement. "The situation is under control." The security chief, a heavily armored Draken, kept his weapon trained on the creature. "Sir, that's impossible. The Kethvar cannot be controlled." "Apparently," Tholar said quietly. "We were wrong about that." Jake felt the Kethvar's attention shift to the newcomers. The creature's posture tensed slightly, and Jake sensed its instinct to defend itself against the armed soldiers, but it made no move to attack. Instead, it looked to Jake as if waiting for his guidance. The gesture sent a shock through everyone present. The galaxy's most dangerous predator was deferring to a human teenager. Jake slowly removed his hand from the creature's head and took a step back. The Kethvar rose to its full height but remained calm, its 6 red eyes now watching the security forces with interest rather than hostility. "It needs to be recontained," the security chief said, though his voice carried uncertainty. "Yes," Tholar agreed, "but I suspect the process will be much easier now." As if understanding the conversation, the Kethvar began walking slowly toward its original containment area. The security forces parted to let it pass, their weapons still raised but no longer necessary. The creature moved with dignity rather than the frantic aggression it had shown during its initial capture. Jake watched it go, still feeling the fading echoes of their psychic connection. Through that link, he understood that something fundamental had changed not just for the Kethvar, but for how the galaxy would view humanity. The creature paused at the entrance to its containment area, and looked back at Jake one final time. In that gaze, Jake saw acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps even something like friendship. Then it stepped into the energy cage and allowed itself to be contained once again. As the containment field snapped back into place, Jake felt the full weight of what had just happened. He looked around at his surviving classmates, all of whom were staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to confusion. "How?" Zixthera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shook his head. "I don't know. I just understood it somehow." Commander Tholer approached, his tablet still recording. "What you've done here will change everything we thought we knew about both species," he said. "The implications are staggering." Word of the incident spread through the Academy within hours. By the end of the day, representatives from a dozen worlds were requesting copies of the security footage. The human who had faced down a Kethvar and lived to tell about it became the subject of intense scientific interest. But for Jake, the most important change was simpler. He no longer wondered what his species brought to the galaxy. He had felt it in his bones, seen it reflected in the eyes of a creature that had never shown respect to anyone. Humans weren't just generalists. They were the ultimate survivors, the species that refused to accept any challenge as insurmountable. They were the apex predators who had earned their place not through strength or speed, but through the simple refusal to give up. As Jake returned to his quarters that evening, he passed other cadets in the hallway. Where before they might have ignored him or offered polite nods, now they stepped aside with genuine respect. Word had already spread about what the average human had accomplished. Looking out at the stars through his small window, Jake smiled. Somewhere out there was Earth, the blue world that had forged humanity in the crucible of evolution, a world where his ancestors had faced down every challenge and emerged victorious. Now he understood why humans had been invited to join the galactic community, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they represented something that even the most advanced civilizations respected, the absolute refusal to be anything less than the ultimate survivors. The Kethvar had recognized that quality and bowed to it. In doing so, it had shown the entire galaxy what Jake Murphy and humanity as a whole truly represented.